The alien city of Zerath Prime was always full of lights, noise, and tall glass towers. Aliens of many colors and shapes walked the shining streets. Flying cars moved above their heads. But deep in one corner of the city, near an old stone wall, sat a girl who no one noticed anymore. Her name was Valina. She was small and quiet, with soft purple skin and silver hair tied in a messy braid. She sat in a floating wheelchair that hummed quietly under her. Her legs were thin, weak, and lifeless. She could not move them. Not for over 10 years. Every day people passed her by. No one stopped. No one spoke. She had become a part of the wall, part of the background. Valina stared at the street with tired eyes. She watched children run and laugh. She watched merchants yell prices. She watched the strong walk tall and free, and she sat. Inside her chair, the control stick was shaking. A wire had come loose again. She moved it carefully, trying to press it back into place. Her fingers hurt. The power flickered. The chair dropped an inch lower and sparked. She sighed. Not again. Just then, she heard footsteps stop beside her. "Having trouble?" a voice asked. She looked up, surprised. It wasn't a Draxion. It wasn't an alien at all. It was a human. A tall man, brown-haired, with soft eyes and a tool bag over his shoulder. He knelt beside her without asking. "Mind if I take a look?" Valina blinked. "You can fix it?" The man smiled. "I fix a lot of things." He worked quickly. His hands were strong, careful. He removed the side panel of her chair, looked inside, and pulled out 2 wires. "Burnt connection," he said. "I can patch it for now." In less than 2 minutes, the power returned. Her chair lifted slightly and floated steady again. "There," he said, wiping his hands. "Better?" Valina looked at him, her voice soft. "Much better. Thank you." The man stood and offered a short bow. "Dr. Julian Cross, human engineer. I'm here to upgrade your city's defense grid, but I couldn't ignore a broken system right in front of me." Valina smiled for the first time in days. "No one has stopped for me in years," she said. Julian's face changed, sadness in his eyes. "They should have," he replied. "You deserve more than silence." Then he turned to leave. But before walking away, he looked back and said something she would never forget. "You deserve more than that chair too." Valina watched him go, heart pounding in her chest. No one had ever said those words to her. No one had ever looked at her and seen anything but a girl who couldn't walk. But he saw her. Later that evening, Valina returned to the care center, where she lived. It was a dull, gray building full of broken tech and quiet hallways. Most of the staff were robots. They did their job, but never smiled. They didn't see her either. Not really. She went to her room. It was small, with only a bed and a window showing part of the city wall. She looked down at her legs, thin, motionless. Then she looked at her chair. And then she remembered his voice. "You deserve more than that chair," she whispered to herself. What if he meant it? The next morning, something unbelievable happened. She was outside again, waiting by the same wall. Her chair was working now, and suddenly, he appeared again. Dr. Julian Cross, same soft smile, same tool bag. "I was hoping you'd be here," he said. "You came back?" she asked, surprised. He nodded. "I couldn't stop thinking. Your chair isn't the problem. The problem is, no one ever tried to help you walk again." Valina looked down. "It's impossible. My nerves are damaged." Julian pulled a small device from his bag. It showed a 3D model of legs, mechanical legs. "I've built exosuits for soldiers. I've helped humans walk after terrible injuries." He looked her in the eye. "Maybe we can do the same for you." Valina didn't know what to say. No one had ever offered her hope before, and now this human, this stranger, was offering her the impossible. "I don't have money," she said. "I don't want your money," Julian replied. "Then why?" she asked. He paused, then answered simply, "Because I saw someone no one else saw. Felina waited by the same wall the next morning. She wasn't sure why. She had told herself that he probably wouldn't come back. After all, the city was full of people with broken tech, and he was just a visitor. But her heart hoped. And then she saw him, Dr. Julian Cross, tool bag on his back, same kind eyes, same calm walk. But this time he was carrying something else. A small metal case. "I said I'd come back," he said with a smile. "You really meant it," Felina whispered. Julian sat cross-legged on the stone beside her. He opened the case and pulled out a set of glowing tools and strange curved wires. "I was thinking about your chair last night," he said, "but mostly I was thinking about you." Felina blinked. "Me?" Julian nodded. "I saw something in you. You didn't beg, you didn't cry, you were just sitting there, quiet, strong, and alone. I've worked with soldiers who had less courage than you." She looked away. "I'm not strong. I've been sitting in this chair for 10 years. Julian paused, then said gently, "And yet you're still here." He worked on her chair again, this time from the inside out. He rewired the energy coil, changed the navigation sensors, and upgraded the shock stabilizers. Every now and then he explained what he was doing in a slow, patient voice. Felina listened carefully. "I've never met someone who cared enough to explain," she said. He smiled. "Machines are easy to understand. People, not so much." She chuckled. "You're different." Julian looked at her, serious now. "I want to try something, but I need your permission." Felina tilted her head. "What is it?" He pulled out a small digital pad. A hologram appeared, a pair of robotic legs, sleek, flexible, glowing blue at the joints. "These are not standard replacements. They're adaptive exolimbs. I designed the system to learn from your movements. If they sync with your body, they won't just move. You'll feel like they're part of you." Felina's hands trembled slightly. "I thought walking again was impossible," she said. Julian met her eyes. "It's not. Not if you're ready." She looked down at her legs, silent, cold, still, then back at him. "I'm ready." For the next hour, they sat together and talked. Not just about technology, but about dreams. Felina told him how she once wanted to be a dancer, how she used to run in the open gardens of her old home before the accident. She hadn't spoken of those memories in years. Julian told her about Earth, about how his younger sister once lost her legs in an accident and how he built her first pair of synthetic limbs. It had taken months, but when she stood again, she had laughed like a child. "I've never forgotten that sound," he said. "It changed my life." Felina was quiet for a moment. Then softly she asked, "Do you think, if I walk again, I might dance too?" Julian grinned. "If you dance, I'll build you better legs every time you wear them out." Later that day, Julian helped Felina back to the care center. This time, she didn't feel embarrassed walking in with him. This time, she felt seen. The robotic attendants at the door gave their usual emotionless greetings, but one paused when it noticed her glowing chair and upgraded system. "New tech detected," the bot said. Felina smiled and replied, "No, new hope." Back in her room, she placed the digital pad beside her bed. On it, the hologram legs still shimmered. And for the first time in 10 years, she didn't stare at her own legs in shame. She stared at what could be. Outside her window, stars began to appear in the darkening sky. She whispered, "Thank you, Julian. I think you're more than a mechanic." Across the city, Julian sat in his temporary lab. He was already sketching the first version of her exoframe. He paused, then scribbled something across the top of the blueprint. Project Felina, Hope in Motion. The care center was quiet the next morning. Most of the other patients were still asleep. The hallway lights were dim. Felina sat alone in the tiny tech room beside the robotics wing. Her hands trembled as she held a strange tool, long, glowing, and sharp at the tip. Across from her, sitting at a workbench covered in wires and steel plates, was Julian Cross. "Don't be nervous," he said with a gentle smile. "You've got this." Valina looked down at the metal part in her hands. It was a joint socket, meant to become part of her robotic leg. Her leg. "I've never done anything like this," she whispered. Julian leaned forward. "That's the best part. We're doing something new." He tapped a small screen and a 3D model popped up. It showed Valina's legs, but not the broken ones she lived with. These were mechanical, sleek and strong. The blue lines showed where nerves would connect. It was beautiful. "Is this really going to work?" she asked. Julian nodded. "It won't be easy, and it won't be fast. But yes, it will work." The first few days were full of trial and error. They worked together every morning. Valina would solder pieces, check wiring paths, and read Julian's designs. She was clumsy at first. Her hand shook. She dropped tools. Once she accidentally sparked a small motor. "I'm sorry," she said, embarrassed. Julian just laughed. "That's how we learn. Do it again." So she did. And each day, she got better. Her fingers became steadier, her eyes sharper, her heart stronger. In the evenings, she returned to her room exhausted but excited. She no longer felt invisible. She no longer felt like a forgotten girl in a chair. Now, she felt like a builder, a dreamer, a partner. One night, while reviewing Julian's sketches, she stopped and stared at the note he had written at the top. Project Valina, Hope in Motion. She touched the screen, smiling. Hope. In her name. But not everyone supported their dream. The care center director, an old alien named Administrator Rethar, visited the tech room one morning. He looked at the wires, tools, and half-built limbs, with cold eyes. "This is not a licensed medical program," he said. "You're wasting valuable time and energy." Julian stood calmly. "We're not asking for permission, just space." Rethar scoffed. "Even if you build them, she'll never walk. Her spine is dead." Valina looked down. Pain crept into her chest, but Julian didn't flinch. He turned to her and said loudly, "The spine is injured, but the spirit isn't." He turned back to Rithar. "Stay out of our way." That evening, Valina stayed late in the lab. She didn't want to stop. She was working on the toe actuator, a tiny part that would control balance. Julian watched her closely. "You didn't give up," he said. Valina didn't look up. "I can't." He smiled. "Good, because I have something for you." From his case, he pulled out 2 small mechanical feet, silver with soft blue lights, shaped to match her alien form. Valina gasped. "These are the first pieces of your new legs," Julian said. "You made them. You earned them." She held them gently, her hands shaking, not from fear but from emotion. "I never thought I'd hold something like this," she whispered. "You didn't just hold it," Julian said. "You helped build it." The next morning, they tried the first fitting. The frame was only partial, upper supports and foot anchors. No motors, no full movement yet. But Julian carefully strapped the frame around her hips and thighs. The frame hummed softly. Valina sat still, breathing hard. "I'm scared," she whispered. Julian knelt beside her. "It's okay to be scared. Just don't stop." She looked at him, then slowly reached for the handrail. With a deep breath, she pushed down. The motors didn't lift her, but her arms did, and her body rose. Just an inch. Just enough for her to feel pressure on her feet. Her legs didn't move, but she was standing. For the first time in 10 years. She cried. Julian held her shoulder. "You did that," he said. And Valina whispered, "No, we did." The care center was still asleep when Valina entered the tech room. She rolled in quietly, the lights of her hover chair flickering against the walls. On the workbench, the robotic leg frames waited, silent and shining, like they were holding their breath. She wasn't alone for long. Julian arrived, holding a small black case. He placed it gently on the table, his face calm but serious. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. Valina nodded. "I've waited 10 years. I won't stop. Now." Inside the black case were two small silver discs, neural connectors. They were smooth, cold, and glowing faint blue. Once attached to her spine and nervous system, they would send signals from her brain directly to the robotic legs. It was a risky step. Painful, experimental, but necessary. Julian helped her onto the medical chair. She gripped the armrest tightly. "This may hurt," he warned. "A lot." "I'm not afraid," she whispered, but her voice trembled. He placed the first connector on the small of her back. It latched to her skin like a magnet and burrowed gently through the top layer of flesh. A sudden shock, like fire, ran through her spine. She cried out and arched her back, her body shaking. "Stop if it's too much," Julian said, moving quickly to hold her steady. "No," she gasped. "Do it!" He placed the second connector. More pain, more fire, but she didn't let go. She didn't scream again. She just closed her eyes and held on. And when it was done, when both connectors glowed soft blue behind her back, she was breathing hard but still sitting tall. Julian gently placed the leg frames over her own. Click, hiss, lock. The legs powered on, the room filled with a low hum. "Try to move your right foot," Julian said. Valina stared ahead, focused. Inside her mind, she told her leg to move. Nothing happened. She tried again. Still nothing. Then, a twitch. The right foot shifted slightly. She gasped. "Do it again," Julian said, eyes wide. She did, and the foot moved forward. Just 1 inch. But it moved. Valina smiled through her tears. It worked. For the next 3 days, they trained. Julian adjusted the balance algorithms. Valina practiced standing, stepping, falling, and standing again. She fell often. Sometimes. Hard. Once she hit the floor so badly she couldn't breathe. Julian ran to help her, but she pushed him back. "No," she said, voice shaking. "Let me get up." She planted her hands, pushed her robotic legs, and stood again. Every time she fell, the floor hurt. But the ground also reminded her she could rise. One evening, after a long day, she sat in silence while Julian adjusted the knee joints. "Why are you helping me?" she asked suddenly. Julian looked up. "Because someone once helped me." He told her the story of his sister again, how she cried for weeks after losing her legs, how she thought life was over, how Julian worked night after night building something that could make her smile again. She didn't need to run, he said. She just needed to believe it was still possible. Valina looked at him with quiet eyes. "You're not just fixing my body," she said. He smiled. "No, I'm just reminding you who you were before the chair." Later that night, Valina stood alone in the center of the tech room. The lights were dim. The only sound was the soft hum of the robotic legs. She closed her eyes and took one step, then another. She stumbled, fell to one knee, but she laughed, because she was walking. The sun was rising over Zareth Prime. Golden light spilled through the care center windows, touching the metal floors, climbing the gray walls. But in one quiet corner of the building, something far brighter was about to rise. Valina stood at the edge of the hallway, not sitting, not waiting, standing. Her robotic legs buzzed softly, light blue energy flowing through each joint. Wires ran like veins along her thighs and knees. The frame clung to her like armor, but felt like skin. Her hands gripped the rail. Julian stood, a few feet behind her, watching carefully, holding his breath. "You're ready," he said. Valina nodded, sweat already on her brow. "I know." She took one step forward. The hallway echoed with the sound of her mechanical foot touching the floor. Then another step, and another. Every muscle in her arms trembled. Her spine burned. The neural connectors buzzed like fire in her back. But she didn't fall. And she didn't stop. At the end of the hallway, a nurse stepped out from the elevator. She looked up and froze. Her tray dropped from her hands, crashing to the floor. She's walking. The sound pulled others out of their rooms, patients, care staff. Even the administrator. One by one they gathered. They didn't speak. They didn't blink. They just watched as the girl who had been rolled through this hallway for over 10 years now walked past them, head held high. Valina reached the glass doors. Julian walked beside her now. "Are you sure?" he asked. She looked through the glass. Outside, the city was waking up, cars flying, vendors shouting, aliens walking, running, flying on jet wings. "No one out there knows me," she said. Then, "It's time they do." She placed her hand on the door panel. The doors slid open, and Valina stepped into the sunlight. At first, no one noticed. She walked slowly onto the city plaza, the hum of her robotic legs blending into the sound of traffic. Then someone gasped. "Is that her? The girl from the care center? She's walking." People began to stop. Vendors looked up. Children pointed. Travelers paused mid-stride. A circle began to form. Valina didn't stop. She walked right to the center of the plaza, where a small fountain splashed in the morning sun. Then she turned, and she stood, straight, tall, alive. The crowd didn't cheer at first. They were too stunned. They had walked past her for years, ignored her, pushed her chair out of the way, pretended she wasn't there, and now here she was, standing in front of them. One old alien woman stepped forward, eyes wide. "Who did this for you?" she asked. Valina smiled gently. "A human. News." Spread fast. Photos taken on personal holoscreens raced through networks. Paralyzed alien girl walks again, with human tech. Earth engineer defies Zerath limitations. She walked, and the city stood still. By nightfall, the story had already traveled off-world. Across 5 systems, her name trended in headlines. But Valina didn't care about the news. That night, she sat on the rooftop garden with Julian, watching stars flicker above. She stretched, her legs in front of her, they gleamed in the starlight. "I used to dream of standing here," she said softly. Julian turned to her. "And now?" "I'm dreaming of running." By morning, Zerath Prime was no longer just another alien capital. It was the center of the galaxy's most talked-about event. Every holoscreen, every news pod, every interstellar feed repeated the same footage. A purple-skinned girl, once forgotten, in a floating chair, now standing tall with robotic legs, smiling, and beside her, a quiet human engineer. In the great towers of the Technocrat Guild, scientists paused their simulations to study the footage frame by frame. "She's not limping," one said. "The balance is perfect." Another whispered, "We've tried this for years. How did a human outsider succeed?" Across the sector, on the planet Velxian, a famous alien inventor slammed his tools in anger. "He made her walk," he hissed. "With junk tech." But others were not angry. They were inspired. At the care center, Valina sat on the edge of the fountain again, legs folded gently beneath her. For the first time, visitors came to see her, a young boy with one arm, a teenager with bent legs, an elderly woman with a shaking frame. They didn't ask her how it worked, they asked her how it felt, and Valina smiled and said, "It feels like I was given a second chance to live." Inside a glass-walled conference room high above the city, Julian Cross sat at a long table. In front of him were 6 officials from across the star systems. One offered him credits, millions, for the tech. Another offered lab space with his name on the door. A third wanted him to license the leg design to a weapons company. Julian sat quietly listening, then finally spoke. "You don't understand." They looked at him, confused. "I didn't build those legs to make money," he said. "I built them for her. For one girl." "But the galaxy could walk again," one protested. Julian leaned forward. "She deserved to walk before the galaxy ever noticed." Then he stood up, picked up his small tool bag, and walked out of the room. The next day, Valina was invited to speak at the High Assembly of Allied Species. The chamber was massive, stone and steel, with rows of silent leaders watching from above. She walked in slowly, robotic legs clicking gently on the floor. No one spoke. They waited. Valina stepped to the center platform and looked up at all of them. I sat in silence for over 10 years, she began. Every day, I watched the world walk past me. She paused. I was never broken. Just ignored. The room remained silent. And then a human saw me. Her voice grew stronger. He didn't offer pity. He offered possibility. She raised her head higher. You didn't give me a cure. You didn't offer help. He did. Her final words echoed through the chamber. I'm not asking for you to build more legs. I'm asking you to start seeing those of us who still sit in shadows. That night, back on the rooftop garden, Valina and Julian sat under the stars. She watched ships fly past in the sky. Do you think they'll actually listen? She asked. Julian shrugged. Some will. And the rest? He smiled. They'll watch you walk, and that'll be enough. Valina stood, testing the legs again. She stretched them, bent them, jumped slightly. She laughed. I think it's time I learned to run. Julian leaned back on the bench. I'll be here when you do. 1 year later, the galaxy had changed. Not because of a war, not because of a king, but because of a girl with metal legs and a human who refused to let her fade away. Valina walked through the gates of a new building on the edge of Zerath. Prime, it wasn't tall or grand, but it was alive. Children of all shapes and species played in the courtyard. Some had missing limbs. Some used old walkers. Some lay on floating stretchers, watching her with wide eyes. They all knew her name. They had seen her story on screens, in books, in schools. She had become more than a symbol. She had become a beginning. The building's name was etched into the wall in both human and Draxion script. The Valina Institute for Mobility and Hope, founded by Julian Crossinside. Teams of young engineers, alien and human, worked together on new designs. Not weapons, not machines of war, but limbs, wheels, balance systems, artificial hands, moving fingers, hopes made of metal and light, and at the heart of it all, walking among them, was Valina. She no longer wore the first set of legs Julian built. Those had been retired, polished, and placed in a glass case with a plaque that read, "These legs didn't change a life. They started a movement." Now she wore a newer pair, lighter, stronger, elegant like wings. Children ran up to wow, her daily shouting, "Miss Valina, look, I took 5 steps today." Or, "My arm can lift now," and she would kneel down, smile wide, and say, "Then the stars are waiting for you." One afternoon Julian walked in, older now, a bit slower, but still carrying his tool bag. Valina ran. To meet him, yes, ran, she hugged him tightly. "Still carrying that old bag?" she teased. He laughed. "Old bag, new missions." They walked through the halls together. "So many kids," he said quietly. "They come from all systems now," Valina replied. "Some parents sold everything just to get here." He looked at her with quiet pride. "You gave them something real." She shook her head. "We did." That night on the rooftop of the Institute, they watched the stars rise again. It had become their tradition. The wind was soft. The sky endless. Below them, robotic lights from the lab shimmered like constellations on the ground. Valina stretched her legs, then turned to Julian. "Do you remember the first time I stood?" "I remember the fear in your eyes," he said. "And now?" Julian looked at her, taller, stronger, full of fire. "Now I see a girl who walks for everyone who thought they couldn't." The next day she gave a speech, not at a government hall, not in front of cameras, but in front of 300 disabled children sitting on soft grass, surrounded by blooming trees. She didn't stand on a stage. She stood among them and said simply, "I was forgotten once. You won't be." She bent down and helped a small boy stand. His robotic legs wobbled. She held his hand, and together, they walked across the field. Every step was shaky. Every step was real. Far above, on the news feeds, a headline quietly appeared. It didn't go viral. It didn't trend. But it told the truth. The girl who was told she'd never walk again just taught a generation to rise. In the garden later that evening, a group of children surrounded her. Miss Valina, one asked, "What would you say to the girl you used to be?" Valina smiled softly, looking down at her legs. Then she looked at the stars and said, "Get ready. You're going places."